All right, well, welcome. Oh, good, that one's working too. Welcome to everyone to the panel on different kinds of schools. And so here we have representatives from a variety of institutions. And what I'm going to do is ask everyone to briefly introduce themselves, very briefly kind of tell their story, and then just describe what their particular home institution is like. So I'll go ahead and get started, so you guys can sit back for a minute. I did my graduate work at University of Washington. And I'm an incredibly indecisive kind of person, and I had no idea what kind of career that I wanted to go into. But I loved teaching, and I had come from a small undergraduate kind of institution, so I kind of had that in the back of my head. My advisor, on the other hand, is one of those people who is very passionate about his job and kind of thinks that, of course, everyone's going to want to do that kind of job. But he wants to be very supportive, so I remember the conversation we had when he asked me if I wanted to apply for postdocs or go and teach at a podunk college. And so that's kind of how he phrased it. And so I applied for everything, postdocs, teaching colleges everywhere, and ended up getting offers from everywhere, which was a challenge to then decide what to do. So being indecisive, I tried to do both. And I took an offer from Belmont University and asked them to wait a year for me to come. And then I went to a postdoc for a year at Cornell University. And so after that year, I started regretting my decision a little bit, but went to Belmont, which is a wonderful institution. And Sarah Ann will tell you a little bit more about that institution. And I kept doing my research while I was there, and then decided to go to a school that would balance both the research and the teaching, which I've really enjoyed. So I'm now here at University of Tennessee. So it's a somewhat large math department. We have about 35 faculty, over 100 graduate students, and I didn't get the number on math majors, but lots of math majors. And it's been I feel like a really good fit for me. So I'll let Sarah Ann talk next.
All right, and I am Sarah Ann Fleming, and I did my grad work at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, so just a few hours away. And I did it in operator theory, and I really knew, even as I was in graduate school, when I first started graduate school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Even declaring a math major, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I kept going to grad school because I wasn't sure what to do. And I had a pre-calculus class that I taught my second year in grad school and loved it. So definitely teaching was something that I fell in love with early on. I enjoyed researching in operator theory, but still that first love was always teaching as I was going through graduate school. And so when I did finish my PhD and went on the job market, I knew exactly what I wanted. I wanted more of a teaching-focused university. And I actually only applied to 17 jobs my first time on the job market, which is crazy when I tell people that, but I was very specific about what I wanted. And so consequently, I was very careful with the applications and geared each one very individually central to the school. I ended up getting a job at a school at North Central College outside Chicago. It's in Naperville, Illinois. It's a school of about 2,500 students, so it was a pretty small school, and very teaching focused. Our teaching load there was 21 hours a year, and so we were more on the quarter system, so we ended up doing kind of a 2-2-3 type of load while I was there. And as far as expectations, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this in the panel, there were definitely expectations for scholarship and professional development and that kind of thing. But the idea of continuing my research, I wasn't going to have a lot of time to continue my research in operator theory. I did go to conferences, I published my dissertation, but I definitely started changing my focus towards thinking more of the teaching ideas and kind of presenting I didn't do publications yet, but presentations on teaching-focused things. I spent 4 years, I was tenure track, headed great towards tenure at North Central College, and when I originally applied, I just wasn't sure that's where I wanted to spend the rest of my life. And there definitely was a culture of, you get your tenure track job and you stay there forever, and I had just moved my entire life. 4 years was the longest I'd ever been in one place, and so I didn't go there thinking I was going to be there forever, and so I talked to a lot of people and decided fourth year was a good time to move. And so I applied, went on the job market again, applied to 4 schools. Again, very focused on what I wanted, but I wanted to be back in the South. My family and friends were all back here, and so applied to Belmont in Nashville, and I was like, Nashville. Well, I liked it the first time. Sure, we'll go back to Nashville. And Belmont was definitely a great fit for me. Belmont was probably about 4,000 students when I started. It's now 7,000, so it's definitely just boomed in the last 9 years. So I've been there for 9 years. We have a 24-hour-a-year teaching load, so that does amount to usually 4 classes per semester, with some, again, professional development scholarship requirements. Question?
Sorry, when you say 4 classes, could you also tell us the class sizes? Because that
Yes. Okay. We my largest teaching load as far as students goes is probably this past fall, and my classes are roughly 30. So with 4, that's about 120 students, and we don't have graders, so that's lots of fun. But so 120. Though when I teach upper level courses, so we have about 100. We're a joint department, math and computer science. We have about 100 majors, and our upper level classes tend to hover around the 15 to 20 mark. So and usually you'll have an upper level course or 2. So having over 100 students is not the norm. Probably the norm is going to be probably more in the 60 to 70 students per semester. And then calculus is 4 hours, so you could actually teach 3 classes as well. Michelle, one of my colleagues over here, has done more of the 3 hours a semester, or 3 classes a semester because of that. Thanks, Christine. So yeah, I think I'll leave it at that, and if you guys have more questions, I can ask.
I didn't realize I was going to be telling a bit of a history, so I was writing some notes here. I got my PhD at the University of Washington, and when I got it, I thought, oh, now what? Because I guess I'd spent all these years wanting the PhD. I knew I wanted the PhD because my father had one, and I did that. And then I didn't know what was next. And to be honest, I had always intended to be a stay-at-home mother. But I didn't have kids at that point, so that wasn't going to work. So I applied for a postdoc and got it. I came from Canada, so I applied for one of the NSERC awards and managed to get it. But on the way to the postdoc, ended up canceling my wedding. So the stay-at-home mom thing is looking a little more difficult. But fell in love with somebody else who was back in Seattle, and I was heading off to postdoc in Colorado. So I spent the 9 months of the postdoc trying to get a job back in Seattle. And I interviewed everywhere. I even interviewed at Amazon, and I'd probably be independently wealthy by now if I'd stayed there. But I've never regretted not working there, so clearly I didn't belong there. Interviewed at a number of different industries and realized that I have academic written all over my face. That's where my training is. That's where I feel comfortable. And ended up getting a job at the University of Washington in the Ethnic Cultural Center. I was an instructor, so my job was to teach. And I taught football players, among other people, which was very interesting, for 2 years. And during that time, because I was back at the University of Washington, it was actually handy to get my thesis work published. So was able to keep publishing at the time. And then the fellow I'd gone back for, we did eventually get married, and he had a job in Arizona, or a postdoc at the University of Arizona. So I went along, but he wasn't earning enough money for us to live on, so I had to do something. So I got a visiting faculty position at the University of Arizona. So mostly I'm following him around, and I wasn't directing my own career, but he wasn't earning enough money, and I had to pull in something. While we were in Arizona, the kids were born, 2 at once. It's very efficient to do it that way. And my mother said she was catching up in the grandchildren department. So I struggled through trying to do the visiting professorship with the twins, and my husband not earning a whole lot of money. And actually decided that I wasn't any good at math biology, and I wanted to switch to math education research. So I spent that year working with people in math education. By the end of that year, my husband found a job back in Canada, in the Okanagan, where we are now. He phoned me up from a conference, and he said, there's a job in the Okanagan, do I apply? And the Okanagan is this magic fruit-growing, retirement, beautiful area. And I said, well, yeah, duh. So he applied, and he got it. And this was kind of uprooting me, so it was difficult. I couldn't carry on with the math education in the same way. We arrived. Why did I apply? I don't know. I applied for a job there, too. I don't know why. We had kids by then. I could have been a stay-at-home mom. But I guess I was worried because all this time he hadn't been earning enough money, and I needed to pull in something. So there was a part-time job. No, there was a tenure track. There was a tenure track job that I applied for, and I didn't get it. But then there was a temporary one that I got, and then I was just going to be part-time. I could be home with the kids. I could work part-time, and then by the time I got there, the other person they had hired had left, and they needed me full-time. And I didn't feel like I could say no at that point. I was too new. So lo and behold, I was working full-time. But it was a university college, which is the closest thing we have in Canada to a 4-year liberal arts college. With essentially, there's no research requirement there, but people liked to do research. And so there was some research happening in the summer, and people recognized that it was good for the students if there was active research going on. So I was encouraged to have something, but it was not a requirement. Actually, it was a very nice place to work as a mother, because even though you're super busy during the term, your work does end in a way that research doesn't. So that year was fine. It was exhausting, but it was fine. But by the end of the year, I had realized that the union rules were that the university could only hire me in a temporary capacity for 2 years, and then they either had to hire me full-time or give me a continuing position, or I was out. And I knew that it meant I was out. That's the way it works. The union thinks they're trying to support part-time people, but they're not. So I had to position myself in such a way that they would hire me. Which meant that I had to start a research program, and then I also knew that I probably wasn't going to get hired in that department. It was full of pure mathematicians, and I'm an applied mathematician. I came up through physics and physiology at McGill and did applied math at UW. I don't have a pure math bone in my body anywhere, so this was tricky. I was lucky at the time. There was a program through NSERC called the University Faculty Award, and the whole goal of the program was to get more women and ethnic minorities in the STEM fields at universities. So to get this, I first had to get a research grant and then apply. Then my name would get moved forward into the pool for this award. And the university had to write letters. And anyway, it was this big thing. So I spent a month. I would get up at the time, I had a temporary nanny who was very unreliable. So I would get up at 3 in the morning and work until the kids came home from school at 11. And then, because they were in kindergarten, I would be with the kids until they went to bed, and I'd start over again at 3 the next morning. And I did that for 6 months. But I managed to get the award, which meant that the university had to hire me, whether they wanted me or not. And lo and behold, it was wonderful. It came with a really low teaching load for 5 years and research money, and I was set. So here I was, tenure track it was still Okanagan University College. So it was mostly a teaching institution with some research, so that was good. And I was back in math biology because in Canada they don't do math education research. I was told that I wasn't going to be able to do that. So I went back to my roots and did that and started having a lot of fun. It was really fun. Discovered I loved the research and developed some self-confidence. And then partway through that, UBC, we had a corporate takeover in the academic world, which tends to get academics very upset. UBC took over. So we were an undergraduate college with campuses up and down the valley. UBC just wanted the one campus that I was at and made it an Okanagan branch of UBC. Now, it's not like the University of California system. We're also not just a small satellite branch. Because we were an established institution with a number of researchers at it, we are a university. We're a funny combination of a big, small university. So we're big because I've got access to Web of Science and all the library resources I could possibly want. I've got access to support with research grants through people in Vancouver, and I've got we can have people from Vancouver on our committees for graduate students very easily. And so there's a lot of support that comes from Vancouver that makes us feel like we're at a big place, but we are at a small campus with 7,000 students or something like that. And we're trying to grow from this teaching-focused place to a research-focused place, which is interesting. Anyway, so UBC came along, and lo and behold, I was tenure track at. They were very, very nice. They they said, here we are, we're at a research university, and you have to get tenure at a research university, but we can start your tenure clock over again. So I got 7 years to get tenure at UBC. And this was starting from, I was going to be a stay-at-home mom, and well then, okay, I guess I better work part-time to pull in a little bit of money because my husband doesn't do enough, and well then, I guess I have to work full-time because it's too early to say no, and oh shoot, I'm tenure track at UBC. So it was kind of scary, but the same as Julia, here I was, I better make the best of it, and it worked out, and I got tenure a few years ago, and I'm loving it. I really love the work, and it's been very helpful to me to have the independence that comes with my own income. It gives me choices at home that I wouldn't have otherwise, and that's been extremely useful. And I love the work, and I get to come here and talk to people like you. I think that's okay.
Hi, I'm not Gretchen Matthews. I guess she wasn't able to make it. I'm Ruth Charney, and I'm currently a professor of mathematics at Brandeis University. And listening to all these stories, I realized that my career, well, it's been longer than any of yours, but has been much more sort of straightforward and simple than a lot of these interesting stories. In fact, the only sort of crazy part of my story was almost not becoming a mathematician at all. Between undergraduate and graduate school, I decided I needed a break from school, and I went off to New York and studied modern dance for a year, and I almost decided to go into modern dance instead of mathematics. But in any case, I decided, no, I could do somehow doing dance as a hobby and math as a career was going to work better than dance as a career and math as a hobby. So I decided I was going to go ahead and do math. I loved math, and I was going to go ahead and do math as my career and dance as my hobby. And once I decided that, I pretty much knew what I wanted to do, and my career path has been pretty straight from that, which is that I wanted to be a research mathematician. I love thinking about math, and that's what I wanted to do. And so I went to graduate school at Princeton, and after graduating, I took a 2-year postdoc at Berkeley. So Berkeley's a huge school. I maybe felt a little lost while I was there, but I did my 2-year postdoc. And then I went on the market looking for, well, at that time, people mostly did one postdoc, and I was looking for tenure-track jobs, but I got an offer from Yale, and it was called an assistant professor position. And so I talked to the chair when he called me to make the offer, and because I knew some of the top schools, the sort of Harvards, and had tenure-track positions that weren't really tenure-track. I mean, they are on the books, but nobody views them as tenure-track positions. So I said, because I had some other alternatives, some other offers. So I said to the chair, I said, this is called a tenure track. This is called an assistant professor position. Realistically, what are the chances of getting tenure? He said, realistically, 0. So, I mean, they didn't really view them as tenure track. They just brought people in for a few years and let them go. I mean, there had been maybe one case of somebody who was so exceptional they decided to make them actually tenure track. But anyway, I took the job anyway because there were some good people there in my field. It was a good place for me to go, and I thought, okay, it's going to be a good experience. And I went knowing full well that this was not a tenure track job. So for me, it was another postdoc. I also had a fellowship for 2 years. And in any case, I ended up 5 years at Yale, including the fellowship times. So I was 2 years at Berkeley, 5 years at Yale before I looked for a serious, was really actually seriously on the tenure track market. And I got a tenure track job. So those are both obviously very research-oriented schools. I was teaching, of course, but the emphasis was on research. I took a tenure track job. I applied for tenure track jobs. I took a tenure track job at Ohio State University, which was one of the biggest. So this is about big schools, small schools. So I think you'll understand what I'm doing on this panel when I tell you this story. So I think Ohio State was one of the biggest, if not the biggest, math department in the country. It was certainly one of the biggest schools in the country. When I came, there were over 70 regular faculty members, plus about 20-some postdocs and endless numbers of adjuncts. I mean, the thing was huge, absolutely enormous department. And I stayed at Ohio State. I taught at Ohio State for 18 years, during which, oh, by the way, my husband followed me there. I got the job there first. He came 2 years later. We weren't married at the time, but we decided to get married, and we decided it was time to have a family. We'd been going out for a long time. We said, okay, we're going to get jobs together, have kids, So I looked for jobs in New York where he was, and he applied to Ohio State and ended up coming to Ohio State. So he followed me there, and we did raise our kids there. So I spent 18 years there, and then in 2003, well, starting about 2000, we started looking for other jobs. Mostly because actually my husband was unhappy there. Things were very bad in his department. He's an economist, not a mathematician. And for various reasons, he really wanted to leave. And I was pretty happy there. But after all, he'd followed me there, and I figured it was my turn, that I could follow him somewhere else. Anyway, we both got job offers at Brandeis University, which is where I am now. Brandeis is one of the smallest research departments in the country. We have about 12 faculty, well, 10 to 12 faculty members, depending on exactly how you count, and like 2 postdocs. I mean, it's tiny. It's a research department, but it's tiny. We have a PhD program. So I went from the biggest to one of the very biggest departments to one of the very small departments. So I really saw the differences. Now, all of them are PhD program. I mean, these are not, but Brandeis takes its undergraduate program extremely serious. They really try to create a liberal arts college atmosphere for their undergraduates. So it's sort of halfway in between. It's like a liberal arts school, but with a full research and graduate program. So I moved in 2003 to Brandeis, and I've also been quite happy there. I was happy at Ohio State, and I've been quite happy there. But I have definitely seen the differences in big school, small school environments. So I think I'll leave it at that. So.
Let's open it up for questions.
How do you feel, let me think how to word it. How do you feel the small school versus the large school responds to the needs that you might have as a woman, as far as maybe doing things a little bit unconventionally? You have kids, so you want to teach maybe these days, how, as far as flexibility or just acknowledging your needs and kind of responding to them when maybe there's not a precedent for it. Does it seem to be easier to navigate that? Is it more comfortable to ask for that at a small school versus large school? Or kind of what are the difference?
Since I'm holding this, I'll do a quick answer and then pass it along to other people. In general, there is more flexibility. There is more possibility for flexibility in a large school, simply because, at Brandeis, we can't cover our courses. I mean, it's really difficult to shift anything around. There's so little room, no extra people, So on the one hand, there is that at a large school, it is sort of easier to shift people's okay, you can teach 2 this term and 0 the next instead of, or, whatever. I mean, you can do, shifting is easier. On the other hand, whether or not this actually occurs, what kind of arrangements they make, will depend a lot on the attitude of the department and the school, and that will not necessarily correspond to big school, small school. I mean, I don't think there's an easy answer to that. In theory, I think the large schools have more flexibility. In practice, I'm not sure they always actually accommodate better.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I would just add that what I'm seeing is a lot of the men have the same issues. So it really is not just the women trying to get home early to take the kids places. And anytime in my department, if you say, I have to go pick up the kids, that's understood. As long as you get your job done, it's okay.
So Belmont has 7,000, and our department has 18 faculty members. So we're not tiny. I felt like North Central was definitely a lot smaller. As far as flexibility, so I have an 18-month-old, and they've been great as far as being really flexible. We switched chairs in the middle of stuff, so both chairs have been really flexible. In the fact that I took a very strange maternity leave where I my baby was due in September, so I taught the first month of the semester. I took 2/3 of the fall semester off and 1/3 of the spring semester off, and came back. We have a night program, so I was able to teach night classes for that. And currently, all my classes are Monday, Wednesday, Friday, done by 3, so I can pick my son up at daycare, and I'm home with him on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So, and I think that is because of the smaller department and the flexibility, or the smaller school and the flexibility of that. And my dean was very supportive of this as well, the dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. Provost was not so much, but he doesn't know maybe all the details, but we get our work done. And I think that's, if we can get everything in and taken care of, then there is that flexibility. I think it would have been harder at North Central with a department of 5 to kind of get everything covered. So, and then in a huge school, I don't have that experience, but I don't know, I'll let these ladies speak to the larger schools, but that's been my story.
So my daughter was born just before I got to Belmont, and then while I was here at UT, my son was born. And so I found both schools to be very flexible, and so I can't really say one over the other, and I think I just had very supportive environments in both schools. I will add that my husband works part-time and stays home with the kids, which makes things a lot easier for me.
Some of you mentioned that you applied for essentially 15 plus jobs when you were initially doing your job search. And I was just curious, were those 15 jobs that you really wanted? Or is it similar to how people encourage undergrads to apply for, encourage high schoolers to apply for undergrad, to essentially just apply for as many as you can, essentially making it a numbers game?
Well, I guess I was the one that mentioned 17 schools the first go around and 3 the second, or 4 the second. I'd only applied to schools that I felt like I would seriously have gone to. But at the same time, I think there's reasons for all the different numbers. I think that once you get, personally, over 100 seems like a lot to be juggling. But I think in this day and age, 17 might be a little bit small, just to have some safety type of options. But I would definitely focus heavily on a smaller number that we can personalize more. But I did only apply to schools I felt like I would be a good fit for.
I'm not in that category.
It partly depends on how pressing it is to get a job. Like, a lot of people will apply 1 year before they have to, or even in graduate school, they know they have the option of staying another year if they don't get a job. And so one strategy is to apply the first year for jobs that really interest you. And then if you don't get it, the next year you do a more blanket. I had one graduate student I was sort of frustrated with because he wanted to apply for jobs for various reasons. And I said, if you wait a year, your thesis is really coming together. I think you'll have more to, you'll be in a better situation. And he said, oh, well, I'll just apply and see what I go for. But then on math jobs, it's so easy to put in a zillion applications. So he just sort of threw them all out there, and he got an offer from a not very good place, and he couldn't get himself to turn it down. Whereas I think if he'd waited, till the next year and done it properly, he could have gotten a really good job. So you have to think, what are you going to do faced with an offer from a place you're not that excited about? Well, if really you have to have a job and there's nothing else, yes, okay, then maybe that's the right thing. But if you have some other options, that might not be the right thing. So I guess I'm saying how many you apply to should depend in part on whether you have any flexibility as to your search.
Quick question for Ruth. So, by the way, I think you are the type of person from Georgia Tech would like to hire Princeton, Berkeley, and Yale. Yes, but it's kind of standard thing in pure math or mathematics that when they hire tenure track position, they want you to maybe graduate from top school like Harvard or maybe do a postdoc in Princeton or IAS. But so I know people in the field of pure math number 3, they do very, very good work, but they graduate from normal school, good school. They're not top tier school like University of Arizona. But they've been having a lot of trouble finding even postdoc position or tenure track position because they don't have strong people writing their letters, you know. So I just want to see what's your opinion on this and what are your general advice for people from maybe who graduate from okay school but they want to do maybe research in top tier school like Brandeis or maybe some other research oriented schools.
So it's not impossible, but it is more difficult certainly to sort of climb from, you know, what's considered a middle tier school up. I mean, you have to really have something to show for yourself. But I really think that there are a huge number of schools out there now that support people doing research. The big state schools, some of the even liberal arts colleges. And I think if you want to do research, you can find a job where they support the idea of you're doing research. They leave you time for it. They give you credit. You know, your evaluations depend on it. You know, you don't have to be at one of the top tier schools to have a great job doing, you know, where you do research. You go to conferences. You interact with your research community. I mean, I always said to myself, you know, because I had all the same confidence issues that everybody else has. I mean, I went through all this stuff. And I always said to myself, I want to be good enough to get a job where I can do what I want to do. I never said I have to have a job at Yale or I have to have a job. It was like, I just want to be good enough to get a job doing what I love doing, which is math. And I wanted to be able to do some research. And then I just, you know, kept plugging away. And I think, and I really believe that I, you know, that almost any kind of, I've been in several different environments, and almost any kind of school I would have ended up at, which supported my doing research, I would have been happy at. And also, the other thing is, if you're concerned about this, and this is a good thing to know, is that if you get a job either in a large metropolitan area or near a major, or if not in, then near some major state school or something, somewhere where you can interact with other people at other schools. You don't necessarily have to be at Harvard to be interacting with the people at Harvard and attending seminars where they go to and starting collaborative research. And so I don't think, no, I can't say, oh yes, you do this and then you'll get a job at a top school. I mean, you might. I'm not saying it's impossible, but that is a challenge. But you can still be working, talking to those people, even working with them, etc. There's a lot of places that support research.
So since most of you worked at one school and then ended up at another, how and when do you go about telling the department you're in that you're looking for another job and there's a possibility you might leave? I mean, you don't want to leave them in the lurch of not having anybody, but you don't want them to hire somebody and then you're just out of luck. So yeah, I did a lot of asking questions about this before I made the move. So I told my department chair around the time I was applying to schools. And then, and she was actually really supportive of it. I mean, she knew that I flew home every single Christmas and summer and stuff. So, I mean, it wasn't a huge surprise. They were sad to see me leave, but they were very supportive. So I told my chair first off. And then when I was about to go for my first interview, she was like, you probably need to tell the provost what's going on. And he would happen to be a math professor too, so that kind of worked out well. So, and again, the school's small, so we only had about 2,500. If you had a bigger school, you probably, at Belmont, I wouldn't tell the provost, I'd tell my dean in the hierarchy. But they were, you know, and I said I was only applying to 4 schools, and if I didn't like any of them, you know, I was staying. And so I was open with my chair about the whole thing. And I also wanted a letter of recommendation from her, because that was another thing as far as my application went. I wanted a letter from her saying that I was heading towards tenure. I was not running for North Central because I wasn't going to get tenure. That was what everybody was very clear on as I talked to them. If I was going to do this before tenure, I needed to be very upfront about that. So I know I needed a letter from her. So some of it had to do with my letters of recommendation. And then, of course, once I accepted the job, I told everyone. But I kept it fairly small until I accepted the job.
my situation was a little different because I didn't actually apply for this job. It kind of, the opportunity rose. And so I told people at Belmont, I told my chair when I was coming to interview, so she would just kind of know the possibility was out there. But then told people once I had signed the paperwork that I was actually leaving, so that then they were able to get someone, a one-year position, to teach the classes I'd been scheduled to teach, and they did a search that following year for someone to replace.
I think here at the University of Tennessee Math Department, people mostly do not tell anybody until they have an offer for another place, right? They do not. I mean, they just get the offer, and then sometimes they negotiate to get perhaps more money or more salary from the University of Tennessee, or they leave. But people don't usually tell, especially department heads or deans, anybody ahead of time. So,
Either way, but yes, usually they don't tell. And that's why there are sometimes these late one-year visiting positions that come on the market because somebody just announced they were leaving, and it's already late to look for a new replacement, so you just advertise a one-year visiting position. I think that's pretty common.
I would say probably would be very easy for people to find out when you go out interviewing with other schools.
because you go give seminars at lots of places, right?
I mean, during that season, like January, February season.
Right, but a lot of people go on, give colloquium here and there. People are going places, so I don't think it's always that obvious.
But do you know there are now websites
Yes, yes.
that post the information that somebody has interviewed?
Really?
Yeah, there is.
I just heard a horror story about somebody, they were interviewing for a position at their school, and they saw one of their professors walk in for an interview. They were like, he has not told anyone he's leaving. And they're like, crap, we could have been interviewing for more. So I just don't want to, I don't want, if I end up leaving ever, which I'm not considering it, maybe, I just don't know if there would be any bad blood. So I guess I'm looking for advice on how to kind of avoid that.
And I think, Susan, that does go towards more your smaller schools, because the larger schools aren't interviewing at the joint math meeting, so there's not that likelihood of seeing that. And then two, within a smaller department, with teaching so many classes, when I was interviewing, I was missing classes, and my chair's office is next door to me, and so there was no way I could have snuck out, for lack of a better expression.
I have a question about the size of classes and how does that correspond to the amount of time you spend on it. I know at the larger schools, you might have 100 students in a calculus class and you have a grader and you have some online homework, versus you were saying like at Belmont, you don't even have that many students total, but you have no grader and maybe more prep. So when looking for a job and trying to weigh, okay, this is, say, a 2-2 teaching load or a 3-3 versus this other school that's a 1-1, but I'm going to have over 100 students every semester, how can we kind of tell what's comparable in the amount of time, sort of thing?
I'll just make one quick comment about the large school, the over 100 students. Now, I don't know if this is true everywhere, but my experience with large classes was at Ohio State. Big classes, they always had TAs, and the TAs, you went in and gave a couple lectures, and the TAs met with the class once or twice a week and did the grading. So if anything, they were less work. Not only that, the students often felt more comfortable going to the TA. I had office hours, but the students often, well, a couple of students would come to mind because they liked me, but often they felt more comfortable with the TAs because that's where they were in smaller classes. Big classes, in my experience, were not more fun, but they were less work than small classes. So it's not just big, small. It is things like, do I grade my own papers? Do I have a TA? I mean, you have to get more information. The other thing that you could do at Ohio State, which I can't do at Brandeis, is sometimes teach 2 sections of the same course. So there's all, again, you trade off what might be interesting or fun, but in terms of time commitment, don't assume that bigger is more. It doesn't always work that way.
Yeah, I would agree. The marking for me is the biggest workload, and so having TAs take care of that is huge. I've started, so last year I had to teach calculus, and I was teaching, there were 3 of us teaching it, and that was a nightmare because we had to meet a lot and make sure we were covering the same material, and the exams had to be edited by 3 people, so that ended up taking a lot of time. But if I'm on my own with a big class, the TAs really help out a whole lot. Now, I am using a new teaching method that I just learned about. Falls in the just-in-time teaching category. I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but where I send out a pre-reading assignment to the students by email, and then they write back, and I try and get them as many as possible read before the class. I can't, so I had 90-some students in this class, and I often couldn't get through all the emails. All I had to read was about 20 of them to figure out whether or not they understood the material, and then randomly answer a bunch so that they all think maybe I've read their email and have it. and so it was interesting. I was able to create a dialogue with the student, but that with a larger class that would add some time. Because at some point I need to try and make sure I've answered most of the people, so that added to my time.
Can I add to that comment, like about ways of doing that type of thing so you can get feedback quickly before class, like you're saying, like just in time. So I started using, so we have Blackboard. I don't know if you guys did. I tried to do like this forum on Blackboard where I told them to post their questions for the section, like they read it, post them, and then in class I tried to answer and address those things. It was very cumbersome, and I started using a software called Piazza, and it's like this beautifully organized forum, Piazza, where it's like a wiki wiki style in the terms that anybody can post a question. Students can answer the question and edit each other's answer, so there's really only one answer, and then instructors can answer. And so they're not asking the same questions because there's a question already posted that somebody else can see, and it's easier for you to answer the question and everybody to benefit from it as opposed to a single email going back to them. And so all of them could post like their questions for the reading or something and go back to that. And that maybe goes to answer kind of your question too. There's always ways, and I'm learning, ways of managing bigger, smaller classes in ways that are going to be meaningful for the students, but take the time off of you. Because it saves me time when people ask me, so is the exam on Friday or Thursday? Well, we don't have class on Thursday, so it's on Friday. Send an email. So is the exam going to be, you know, and it's like one question posted on Piazza, it's answered for everybody, and I don't have that time consumption with the emails coming in, especially with a large class, because everybody will be like asking you questions. You're like, look at the syllabus. It's on the syllabus. Just look at the syllabus, you know. And especially large freshman classes, they don't know what's going on in the undergrad world yet, and so they're always asking you for all of that information that they could find elsewhere. But at least this would give a way of answering the question once. It's out there, and it really helps. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. I love the just-in-time thing.
Yeah.
It's hard, but I think it can be really useful.
It's been great. So I've got a dialogue with the students that I never had before. It's just, at least they think they have a dialogue with me, which is what counts, right? They just
With each other, and with this, they have a dialogue with each other too.
yeah, which is really good. Yeah. So anyway, bigger classes the smaller classes are more fun, but they're more work.
Since my largest class has been 30, I'll pass it on.
I would agree with the comments said that there's more support for the large class because you're not the sole instructor there, and so they're not necessarily any more work.
Okay, no more questions then? Okay. Okay, thank you to our panelists.